Okay, to start, we clearly have a new setup. I may have hinted that in a previous video, but I got a new place. Um, Moved, set up a new area. So until we figure out the best spot in this new apartment, we're gonna make videos off of this weird angle. At least now you get to see something behind me. I hope you enjoy the poster and the books. But yeah, let's get into the video. Do you like filler? You know, the scenes, episodes, and arcs that don't move along the main story per se, but rather move along the characters and their subplots. Scenes that focus more on an aspect of the story that, if removed, would not change the overarching plot probably at all. No? Well, let me phrase it like this then. Do you like Naruto's Land of Waves arc, where you meet Zabuza and Haku? Do you like any scene where Robert Baratheon talks to someone from behind his desk? How about when Team Avatar visits the Kyoshi Warriors on Kyoshi Island? Do you like that episode? Assuming you've seen any of these three shows, and you like them, you probably enjoyed the arc, scene, and episode I just named. But guess what? The stories those shows were telling would be the same if you removed any of them from the overarching story. Nothing happens in them that the overarching story can't immediately replace with something shorter. But you wouldn't call these scenes, arcs, and episodes filler. But that's exactly what they are. Personally, I don't think audiences actually hate filler. They hate filler that they know is filler. Filler that doesn't respect their time. So yeah, there's the thesis statement of the video. Guess right there. But what is filler when talking about a story? Filler pertains to scenes, chapters, episodes, and story arcs where the overarching plot comes to a halt. Usually it stops to show this side story that may or may not provide some much needed character development for your characters. Even when filler content does provide long-lasting character development, it's likely something that could have been in something else, or somewhere else in the story. Even when filler content does provide long-lasting character development, it's likely it was something that could have been somewhere else in the story. For example, in the episode of Avatar The Last Airbender, where Team Avatar visits the Kyoshi Warriors, Sokka gets a lesson in sexism. This has been a prevailing character flaw in him since the show's start, and the story was building up to him learning a lesson and not being a jerk. The writing team could have had a slow burn character arc where he learned to correct his sexist ways while the main plot was still going on. Instead, they decided to focus on it in this filler episode as part of the B plot. This choice ended up leading to a classic episode beloved by fans and critics alike, showing that filler can be entertaining and beloved. From this, we can tell that filler can be important to the story's sin. Yes, you should have most of your character development during the main plot, but it's filler content that makes the big moments really hit. You don't always have time in the main plot to cement what characters are thinking about during the overarching narrative. Sometimes you just have to pass over their inner thoughts in the turmoil of the heat of the moment. In these moments, you have to trust the audience to read between the lines. If you, as the writer, can't confidently expect the audience to know your characters well enough to read between the lines now and then, you're missing some much needed character work. What do you do when you can't fit that character work into the main plot? You create filler. It's in filler where you can cement the small details of a character's personality, where you can put them in small situations that will inform their decisions and reactions later on. It's better to reveal a small detail about a character that the audience couldn't naturally guess at during a low-stakes moment than during your story's climax. If you wait for the climax, the audience can be confused, or worse, find themselves questioning the character's actions and motivations when they're not meant to. This means that filler is sometimes useful and necessary to the story. You can't have a story without characters, or else you probably just have a textbook. You can't have quality characters if they don't have subplots to develop during the story. How do you create filler content that people love, that eloquently informs the audience of character details they want to know, rather than something your audience just skips? Basically, what's the difference between the Land of Waves arc in Naruto and the time Naruto fought a mecha version of himself? In the former, the audience never noticed it. Now, here's where I think a lot of writers can get confused. I've gotten confused about this myself. You may think to yourself, the worst examples of filler go on too long. In truth, length has little to do with it. It's really the pacing of the story, mainly in reference to tonal transitions. If the pacing is consistent and has a quality tonal transition, the audience won't even notice this filler until it's done. When you create filler content, you need to maintain the same tones that you were using just before the shift. at least while you are transitioning the audience into the filler content. Sticking with Naruto as an example, a fan favorite anime of mine, the story perfectly transitions from Team Kakashi forming into the Lands of Waves arc. By contrast, Naruto's canon story stops for a non-canon episode where he runs into a mecha version of himself. And, well, to be honest, I don't know if it's really possible for that franchise to transition to that concept. Yet, you know they're both filler sections because neither actually helps Naruto come closer to becoming Hokage and defeating evil beyond developing him as a character. Sasuke could have gotten his Sharingan at another point, and Naruto could have used the Nine Tails for the first time during the Chunin exams. The Land of Waves arc is filler, but what Naruto fan will cut it out? Very few, I would bet. So filler can be good when its pacing is done well, but that's not all. The filler should tell us something about the character that we would struggle to learn from the main plot. To illustrate how this works, let's talk about early Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, one of my favorite scenes comes from season 1, where King Robert Baratheon sits in his office with his wife, Queen Cersei Lannister. During this conversation, Robert is nervous about the possibility of another Targaryen usurper in Daenerys Targaryen. Cersei suggests that Daenerys is an ocean away, a child, and without an army. Even if she gets the army, the people she's recruiting, the Dothraki, are afraid to cross the seas. And even if the Dothraki will cross the seas, they can't get into their castles. They're raiders. So they would be safe. As far as she is concerned, her husband King Robert has nothing to worry about. An important thing to remember in this scene is that King Robert has been worrying about Daenerys since the show started. In previous scenes, he's been painted as paranoid, vicious, and overly aggressive towards another character who, at this point, isn't guaranteed to be a threat to him. For all he knows, she's just a child, caught up in trying to survive. This doesn't paint Robert as being particularly smart, let alone as someone who has his people's best interests in mind. The audience learns through this one conversation that these surface level thoughts on Robert's character aren't at all correct. First, he explains how much of a threat Daenerys can be by illustrating how she can lead an army against him, just like how he successfully led a rebellion against her elder brother years prior. His monologue about how one unified army would defeat 5 separate ones shows us that Robert is no fool when it comes to war. We just haven't had the chance to see what he's really capable of. Then he reminds Cersei of that while they can hide and starve in their castles, safe from the Dothraki horde, the Dothraki will pillage the people not safe behind the castle walls. In his own haunting words, which I will now paraphrase and butcher, who is the people's king when wandering bands of murderers are taking and killing everything the people own? Not the king who's hiding behind his walls, surely. This was a filler scene, one that may not have even been in the novel. I haven't read the book in a long time. Someone can double check me on that. If you cut this scene, the overarching story is the same. Spoiler warning for the first season of Game of Thrones, a season that came out 10 decades ago. Robert will still die, Ned will still die, and the War of the Five Kings will still happen, even if this scene is cut out. It's filler. Yet, most fans likely didn't even notice it because it maintained the tone of the rest of the episode and furthered the show's subplot about the future threat of Daenerys. This scene elevates a later scene in season 7, when Daenerys does what Robert warned Cersei she would do: lead a Dothraki to pillage his kingdom. Alright, that's a pretty big spoiler, but again, the show has been off for a couple of years now. This scene didn't move the plot forward, but it did tell the audience so much about the characters it focused on. Without it, later scenes wouldn't have hit as hard. Sometimes, filler can feel pretty necessary. All that said, I am a fiction writer of books, so I would be bereft if I didn't at least give one example of how to write good filler that's actually from a book. A favorite novel of mine that I read last year, Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Junpeko, is full of scenes that don't move the main story along, like chock full of them. But they're all integral to the audience's enjoyment of the story. For context, Silver Under Nightfall is about Remy Prendergast, a vampire hunter called the Reaper who comes from a long line of vampire hunters. When a clan of vampires makes peace with his country to fight off an infection that's turning humans into zombie-like monstrosities instead of vampires, he catches the attention, you could say, of a vampire couple, both leaders of their own covens. That's right, people. This novel has a true love triangle. To this end, the novel is full of scenes where Remy is bickering/flirting with both of his love interests one-on-one and as a couple, as his love interests work together to bring about his awakening as a bisexual bottom. Yeah, they said that. There are so many scenes that don't actively move the plot closer to figure out what's causing humans to turn into zombie monsters instead of vampires, and most readers will never notice. I, for one, was too busy being enthralled in the next way Remy can form the throuple he really needs. Whether it's training with his female love interest, doing experiments with his male love interest, or walking in on the two love interests smashing without him. I could care less about the zombie monsters. The reason this works is that the many filler scenes further the subplots the audience actually cares about. And by audience, in this case, it's me. And it does this while having small scenes and plot points that drive the main plot enough while intersecting with the subplots. Not only does this work, this style of writing works in a lot of books, particularly romance. And before you scoff, romance is one of, if not the highest selling genre year after year. Sure, sometimes other genres spike and outperform it, but no other genre has consistent financial success as romance. Romance is a genre whose stories are built on scenes and chapters that could be defined as filler. So, what's the point of everything I've been saying? Filler ain't that bad. We shouldn't be averse to the concept of filler or criticism that it doesn't move the plot forward. Rather, I believe we should criticize filler that we know is filler as we're experiencing it. A story does not have to keep the ball rolling throughout every page and every line of the book. Sometimes a book can just have the characters go to the beach, talk in the office, and have conversations that will not further their lives. We learn some of the most interesting things about characters in these scenes, things we would never learn otherwise. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe, check out the YouTube channel, our other writing videos, and maybe read some chapters of my book on the website. Links are available in the description below. Seriously, I put a lot of work into not only the channel, but the books themselves. I would really love if anyone were to watch it, and by this time, there might actually be an audio video of one of my short stories. Check that out if you really want to know how my writing is without having to read. I know some people don't like reading for some reason. I think you all should. Thank you. Have a good night.